Hello everyone, and a warm welcome back to this new video. It's great to have you all here again. As you can see, they're right next to me. Today we're talking about battery-powered blowers. More specifically, I'm bringing you a comprehensive comparison of Makita's battery-powered leaf blowers. From 18 volts for small to medium-sized areas all the way up to 40 volts, we've got it all covered. The question arises, how effective are these devices? Where do they differ? And of course, which one should you choose? I will address these questions in detail in this video together with you. So without further ado, let's not waste any time and dive right in after the intro. But as usual, if you haven't already, definitely subscribe to this channel for free and activate the bell to never miss a new video in the future. You can find the current prices of these three devices in the video description below. Thank you very much for your support, and let's get started after the intro. As is well known with Makita, there are various versions of leaf blowers available. From 18 to 36 all the way up to 40 volts, they have it all. But these are, of course, not all blowers. There are also much smaller ones, such as the DUB185, 186, and so on and so forth. However, these smaller devices naturally deliver significantly less power compared to these three large devices. That's why I suggest excluding these small devices from this video. This means we're exclusively focusing on these three powerful devices, 18, 36, and 40 volts in comparison. So we have before us the pure 18-volt device, the Makita DUB184. Next is the 36-volt model powered by two 18-volt batteries, probably the most well-known device, the Makita battery-powered leaf blower DUB362. And finally, the newest and probably the most powerful device, the 40-volt XGT UB001 blower. As you can already see, these three blowers have very similar designs, which is why I've excluded all the other blowers, such as the Makita DUB186 or even the vacuum cleaner, the Makita DUB363, from this comparison. That means we're really focusing exclusively on the typical powerful handheld devices DUB184, 362, and UB001. Also very important, I have already introduced each of these devices in detail and separately, so if you haven't seen those videos yet, make sure to check them out. I'll link them right here on the top right corner of the info card, as I mentioned earlier. Like I said, today's focus is on the big comparison video of these three devices, meaning I won't go over all the individual details separately, but we will look at the similarities and differences between these three devices. As already mentioned, these are Makita's well-known handheld blowers. At the front, the nozzle, right behind it, the powerful motor with a turbine, and on top, the handle. You can see, in terms of construction, these blowers are more than identical. That's why the devil is in the details, especially when you look at the controls up here. Also, the handle, and of course, not to forget, the battery compartment at the back. I would suggest let's start with the most visually striking point of these three devices, which is the size or the weight. As you can see from the side view, in my opinion, all three devices are almost the same size. The only one that stands out here is the 36-volt device. It's a few centimeters longer, specifically in terms of the motor housing. But other than that, all three devices are almost identical in both height and width. The next point that stands out is, of course, the nozzle. In this regard, currently, the 18-volt blower, the Makita DUB184, is in the first place, followed by the 36-volt device, the DUB362, and in the last place, the 40-volt device, the UB001. But it's crucial to know the nozzles, or more precisely telescopic nozzles, can be adjusted in length and equipped with different attachments. So, depending on how you want to equip your leaf blower, you can extend and adjust the telescopic nozzle in the predefined stages or easily change the attachments at the front. I have to admit, sometimes it's a bit tricky, but clearly, how often do you need to change the nozzles or the nozzle tube here? It won't happen daily for sure. But the advantage is we can quickly swap the nozzles without needing any tools or anything. Additionally, the leaf blowers come with several nozzles and nozzle tubes in the package, which means we have a round nozzle, a flat nozzle, and sometimes an extension. Regarding this, it's best to watch the individual videos because in those videos, I've delved into all the nozzles and nozzle tubes separately. Nevertheless, I have to admit, in my opinion, all three nozzles are entirely sufficient in terms of length, allowing you to comfortably blow leaves together without having to bend over. But as I mentioned, there are different nozzles available, such as a flat or round nozzle. Oh, and if some of you might consider swapping the nozzles, unfortunately it's not possible because firstly, they have different diameters. For example, the largest diameter is found on the 40-volt blower. The nozzle, for instance, doesn't fit on the other two. It's also not possible to swap the nozzles between these two devices. So the nozzles only fit the respective device, which I personally find a bit disappointing. Let's move on to one of the most crucial aspects of a cordless leaf blower, which is the weight, because as mentioned, the device must be continuously held with one hand through the handle. Of course, it's possible to attach a shoulder strap here. I'll also touch on that later, but the lighter the device is, the more comfortable it is to handle. There's no denying that. Which is why I've measured all three devices once with a large battery because, of course, we want to achieve maximum runtime with each device. Starting with the DUB184, the pure 18-volt blower. For this, I used an 18-volt with 5 ampere hours, and we end up with a total weight of around 3,000 grams with a large battery, which is very, very light. Next up is the 40-volt blower. For this, I used a large 40-volt with 4 ampere hours, and we land at a substantial weight of approximately 3,400 grams, which is another 400 grams more than the 18-volt blower, which in my opinion is still quite acceptable. And finally, the 36-volt blower. For this, we logically need two 18-volt batteries. The device is naturally much heavier due to this, and here we end up with two 18-volt batteries, each with 5 ampere hours at a proud 4,250 grams. And I would say you can feel the difference, especially in comparison to these two very handy and compact devices. So, if you want to be as lightweight as possible, then of course the DUB184, weighing only 3,000 grams, is the top choice. But I have to say, the weight difference between these two devices, 400 grams more, is actually negligible. In my opinion, these two devices are on par, whereas the DUB362, the 36-volt blower, stands out quite significantly here. Whoever says 3,000 grams is just too much for one hand, no problem. As I mentioned, a suitable shoulder strap is included in the package. It attaches to the machine at the front and back. Here you can see these small eyelets. In this regard, all three machines are completely identical and thus most of the weight is distributed over the shoulder strap. The respective machine becomes significantly lighter. Personally, I must say I've always operated the machines without the shoulder strap because I find the handling much more comfortable that way. Moving on to the body of these three devices. Here, seen in turquoise at the back and as you can see from the side view, all three blowers have almost identical constructions, but the difference lies, as mentioned, in the details. That means in addition to all the similarities, there are also a few small differences that we'll take a detailed look at now. Firstly, it's worth noting that all three blowers are powered by a powerful brushless motor. This motor is housed at the bottom and, in turn, powers a high-performance turbine that produces the airflow at the front. In this regard, it's important to mention that these three devices have different power ratings, air speeds, and airflow volumes that come out of the nozzle at the front. So, all three devices have a powerful and efficient brushless motor. Check. This is also evident from the BL logos. Additionally, all three devices are splash-proof, so if it starts drizzling, which is not uncommon in the fall, we can continue blowing leaves together. Apart from the XLT, XGT, and BL logos, you'll find the respective handle of the blower at the top. As you can see, it's black and completely rubberized. The underside of the handle also has a rubberized texture with a slight ridging. This provides significantly more grip. This means every handle offers high slip resistance, and in terms of ergonomics, all three handles are very comfortable to hold. There's no noticeable difference in this regard. The most distinctive difference among these three devices, or rather these three handles, in my opinion, becomes apparent when you look at them from the top down. Because, as you can see, these two devices, the 18 volt and the 40 volt, have the same locking mechanism on the top. We have this small lever here, allowing us to lock the speed at each level. This means we don't have to continuously press the trigger on the underside, but can smoothly lock the blower, for example at 50%, and it'll run continuously at that speed. However, it's a bit different with the 36 volt model. Here we don't have a thumb lock. Instead, there's a small dial with a total of 6 levels. This allows us to predefine the speed but not lock it in the same way. For instance, if we don't want to use the full speed on level 6, but want to slightly reduce it beforehand, we can adjust the dial to level 3, ensuring that we're at 50% of the maximum speed. I've made a separate video about the DUB362 as I mentioned earlier. Still, I must say, I personally prefer this locking mechanism a bit more because it's easy to lock the respective speed with the thumb, whereas with the DUB362, I have to press this side button here to lock the speed, which can be a little less convenient. Regarding the regulation, all three leaf blowers are completely identical. That means we have a generously sized trigger on the underside of the handle, allowing us to easily and smoothly adjust the airflow volume and speed. I must say, in terms of handling, all three triggers or speed controls are very comfortable. There are no glitches or anything. They're very sensitive. However, it's a bit different when it comes to activation. As some of you might have noticed, the 40 volt device stands out among these three. This means the 18 volt and the 36 volt devices are continuously ready for use. As soon as 1 or 2 batteries are inserted, the leaf blower can be activated directly using the trigger. The situation is different for the 40 volt device. Even if there's a 40 volt battery inside, the blower can't be activated because we find another small membrane button on the front, which needs to be pressed first for the device to be activated. Nevertheless, I find this type of activation somewhat better because the leaf blower needs to be activated before use and is not continuously ready for use. It might happen that I want to transport the leaf blower and accidentally press the trigger on the handle. Then the leaf blower goes full throttle immediately. This won't happen with the 40 volt device because I have to activate it beforehand using the button. Now, some might argue that having an extra button to press beforehand is unnecessary. That's why I'm really curious about your thoughts on this activation method. Feel free to write your comments down below. So, either a small button for activation or, as with these two devices, continuously ready for use. Let's move on to the next interesting and crucial comparison criterion for these three devices, which is the power supply. Cordless leaf blowers are known to be quite power hungry, and that's why I've installed nice large batteries in these three devices. As mentioned before, for the 18 volt model, one 18 volt battery with 5 ampere hours, for the 36 volt model, 2 of these batteries, and for the 40 volt device, the UB001, a 40 volt battery with 4 ampere hours. With these batteries, these three leaf blowers should achieve very good run times. How long each leaf blower will last in conjunction with these large batteries will be shown in the practical test afterward. Also very interesting is the positioning and orientation of the batteries. In the 40 volt device, or rather the new 40 volt batteries, the battery level indicator is already integrated onto the batteries on the front. This means with the 40 volt model, there's no need to install an additional battery level indicator. It's integrated here directly into the battery, which is inserted from the top into the slot. This way, we can continuously read the battery level during use, which I find quite practical. For the 36 volt device, it's very similar. Here too, the batteries are inserted from the top into the battery slot. But as we know, the battery level indicator of the batteries is on the underside, making it a bit harder to read, unless there's a separate battery level indicator integrated directly into the device. This allows us to read the battery level on the top, which is also very convenient. Only the smaller variant, the DUB184, has neither, meaning it doesn't have a battery level indicator on the device or on the top of the battery. So when we want to check the battery level, we really have to take out the battery, check the battery level on the underside, and then continue working. This means it might be desirable to have a small battery level indicator integrated directly into the device for this unit as well. And not to forget the, in my opinion, significant advantage with these two devices, we only need one battery for operation. This means with this unit, we always need these two batteries for the device to work. This setup is much more convenient with these two devices, the 18 volt and the 40 volt models. Here, I only need one battery and the device is ready for use. Also, in terms of carrying it around, I find it much more comfortable compared to the 36 volt model. And with that, I would say let's move on to the most interesting point that everyone has probably been waiting for. How do these three leaf blowers perform in comparison? First of all, it's important to note that the 40 volt device has a slight advantage over these two devices, as we have the normal power range, but when we fully press the trigger, we feel a slight resistance, and then we enter the boost mode. Here, the leaf blower delivers even more power, essentially the maximum possible. But let's start with the idle speed produced by the turbine, which ultimately creates the maximum air volume or maximum airspeed. That means the DUB184, the 18 volt device, delivers a maximum of 18,000 revolutions per minute, which is definitely quite decent, followed by the 36 volt device with 21,500 and the 40 volt device with a maximum of 20,000 in the normal power range, and then in boost mode with an impressive 23,000 revolutions per minute. So there's a significant increase here. Next, let's talk about the air volume. The 18 volt device delivers a whopping 13 cubic meters per minute. For this device, it's 13.4, so not a huge difference. And I would say for this device, let's focus on the pure boost mode, meaning this device achieves a maximum of 16 cubic meters per minute, which is truly insane. And now the air speeds given in kilometers per hour. Here, the DUB184 already delivers an impressive 187 kilometers per hour, which is actually crazy. Next, followed by the 36 volt device with 194 kilometers per hour. And now, the last one, the MAKITA UB001, with a mind-blowing 230 kilometers per hour in airspeed. So, as you can see, there are already significant differences in theory between these three devices. But now, it's time to put them to the test in practical scenarios. Let's dive in and see how these three leaf blowers perform comparatively. So sit back and enjoy the practical test. And with that, I would say it's time to take a quick look at the three powerful cordless blowers in comparison. It's the MAKITA 18 volt DUB184 versus 36 volt DUB362 versus 40 volt UB001. For each blower, I used a freshly charged battery. For the LXT devices, a large 5 ampere-hour battery, and for the 40 volt device, a 4 ampere-hour battery for maximum performance and endurance. Additionally, all devices were in the highest power mode during the tests. For the MAKITA DUB362, it's level number 6, and for the UB001, the so-called boost mode. The 18 volt blower, on the other hand, has only one power level. As a test area, I used a common grassy area where a lawnmower usually operates. As you can see, there are plenty of lime flowers and leaves, some of which have been there for a while and are somewhat embedded. Let's see how the blowers perform in comparison here. I started with the 18 volt blower DUB184 at its maximum setting. The first thing that stands out is the weight, as the DUB184 is comparatively light due to its compact size and single battery. This, in turn, allows for very comfortable handling, enabling long, fatigue-free operation. In terms of performance, I have to say it's sufficient but not outstanding. This means the blower had no trouble with the leaves, but the overall process did take some time. I wouldn't want to use the DUB184 for large wet leaves as it quickly reaches its performance limit in such cases. Next, I opted for the 36 volt blower, the DUB362, which sort of opened my eyes, because the difference was enormous in two aspects. Through the direct comparison, you immediately notice how massive and heavy the 36-volt version with 2 large batteries really is. While the device has significantly more power than the 18-volt model, it's also less comfortable to handle. After a short while, I could feel significant strain in my forearm, which can only be alleviated by switching hands regularly. Luckily, with this blower, I cleaned the area much faster due to its noticeable difference in power. It handles wet leaves without any difficulties as well. Finally, just before my arm fell off, I tested the 40-volt blower UB001. Compared to the 36-volt machine, there was again a noticeable difference in weight from the beginning. The 40-volt blower is a bit heavier than the 18-volt device, but still significantly lighter than the 36-volt one, and I must say, you can feel it. In terms of handling, there's nothing to complain about, and the weight is perfectly fine for extended use. Not to forget the performance. In the normal power range, I couldn't discern any significant difference between the 36-volt and the 40-volt blowers. Both blowers are very powerful and have no issues with wet autumn leaves. Only when you press the boost button, you realize the hidden reserves that the XGT blower has to offer, because this blower is by far the most powerful device in the test. All in all, it can be said that all blowers performed very well. The decision on which device to choose mainly depends on personal preferences and requirements. If you need a very compact and handy blower for small to medium areas in the 18-volt system, then the DUB184 should be sufficient. If you still prefer the 18-volt system and don't mind a slightly heavier device, you should go for the DUB362. For everyone else who wants to get the maximum out of it and is willing to dive into the new 40-volt system, I would clearly recommend the UB001. Now it's your turn. What's your opinion on these 3 leaf blowers, and which one would you choose, or which one of these 3 blowers are you currently using? Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And that wraps up this video. If you found the information helpful, please show your support with a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay updated on future videos. You can find the current prices of these 3 devices in the video description below. Thank you for your regular support, and with that, I would say goodbye, and I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Goodbye.